Thank you so much, former governor, for joining us today. It's really great to have you here. And over the weekend, of course, it was Independence Day, and you made a very inspiring presentation on your thoughts on governance in Nigeria. Before we get into governance, it would be great to hear your perspective on the economy. It's definitely a tough time on the national and subnational level. You obviously made some very interesting strides when you were governor in terms of how you were able to manage the local economy. When you look at Nigeria today, your perspective on where we are and the best way forward for this economy.
Well, Wale, thank you for having me and inviting me for this section. For me, the issue of the economy, using what is happening today in Nigeria, is that the government at the center need to have a properly articulated economic policies that can drive the economy. And the drivers of this, call it economy, has to be focused on driving to the same destination. But I mean the drivers, the ministers, the leader, everybody has to be focused on it. They have to be able to develop, rigorously policies that are deliverable, people can trust, and they can tell their story. Because if people can believe their story, then they will create hope. Economy, for me, is driven by hope. Because once people can see hope, then they will have faith and confidence.
Right.
I don't see economy as going to church. I'm a Christian. I go to church because the pastor, the priest is always preaching that we're going to heaven. Nobody has been there. It's all about selling hope. And because there's hope, there's faith in me. What the enduring part of hope, what drives enduring part of it is faith. It is what gives it, okay, we're going to do this, and if we do this, this is going to happen and everything. People have to see the commitment. What you see today is a bit of lack of coordination in the thinking process and especially in communication. And when you have a bit of lack of coordination in communication, you create a sense of hopelessness. You bring fear in the system, and everybody will run for cover. Imagine, you go to church on Sunday, and the pastor says, there's no heaven. So why are you there again? You go home. Because you can see it, or you go there, and so that's...
So what you're saying is that the messaging of a very well-articulated plan out of this difficult time is what is lacking, and that is what is putting so many people on the sidelines. We see foreign investors, for instance, not getting involved in the stock market, and even foreign direct investments have also dropped to historic lows.
Yes, because it needs to be a believable message so that the people can have confidence and have faith in. And the messenger has to also be somebody that can be trusted.
But so it's not enough, as we've seen with the budget, it's been clear they want to spend more to get out of recession. Next year, we're already getting indications that there will be more spending. And for you, clearly, that is not enough.
No, those things are what you can call the enablers if people can see hope. People need to know, yeah, you can say, oh, well, we're going to do this, but what is missing there is a sense of driving hope. If you look at the strong economies of the world, it's not as if they're perfect. What is there is that they're preaching hope. Just like I said, you go to church, they're telling you, if you do this, you go to heaven, you do this and everything. And that is what is driving that process. There needs to be a sense of, oh, if this is what we are going, we all believe in it. Will it show me a perfect economy? There's none. It is just that people are selling hope, which is giving faith, is a enduring part of it, to stay on and say, well, if this is going to happen, I'm going to be part of this. It is not just enough to say this. There's other issues that needs to be managed. And I keep saying communication. Coordination in communication is critical. Today, there seems to be different informations coming to the table. You know, I said this at one time, that there was a time somebody said we're in technical recession, we'll be out of it in September. In September, said this last quarter, then suddenly said, no, I don't know when it's going to be. Well, if you're in that, you run for cover.
Okay, but let's take this conversation to the sub-national level, because obviously that's where you operated. Very interesting time as the governor of Anambra State in terms of how you're able to manage the resources of that government. What's your message to the other state governments today, who many of them we know are struggling on the fiscal side?
Well, you know, whenever I say it, people think, oh, well, you're trying to say this is not happening or this is not happening. For me, it's just like what you said about the budget earlier, the budget of next year and this and that. Vision, if you listen to Theresa May yesterday, is nothing if it's not seen through. And to see it through, you have to have committed drivers of that vision. Vision in itself does not change anything. It doesn't put food on the table. It doesn't educate the children. What makes a difference in any vision or in any policy, any system, is the people that drives it. Same thing in the subnational is for people to sit down and say, wait a minute, what are we doing? If you go to most of the states, and I use a case in point when I took over, there's no plan. If you don't have a plan, you have plan to fail. That's what you
inherited as well?
Yeah. If you don't have a plan, you have plan to fail. I was the person that created Ministry of Economic Planning. You ask people in education, what are you doing? They say, oh, they're just here. People in housing, what are you doing? So when we looked at all that, we found out that basically there's something lacking. And all we did was very simple. And that is what I advocate for people today. We went and borrowed a well-thought, call it development agenda, from the UN called MDG. Because today you see people say 3-point agenda, 1-point agenda, 7-point agenda. There's confusion everywhere. There's already an articulated agenda that if you follow it, you do a lot of work. We went and borrowed what the MDG and put that forward as our vision. All we did was to develop a strategy for delivery of all MDG goals. And we created what we call Anambra Integrated Development Strategy. It was only a process that allowed us to plan properly across all the MDG goals, budget properly, ensure execution. We moved our budget from being supply-driven to demand-driven. So we went to the people and said, what can we do? Because if you look at the MDG goals, it says fight extreme poverty, education, health, everything that you need to do. And because we're able to plan properly across all the MDG goals, budget properly, we could see the budget gaps that we were able to approach development partners to assist us and everything. And we can look at where to cut costs in order to put here, because why do we want to have to do this? If I tell you, like an education, why do we have to have an office of the governor that was consuming 15% of our budget?
15% of
about
the budget?
That, yes, about that. 15% of our budget.
Only for the office of the governor?
Oh, yeah, and a lot of things. You know, there's a lot of things included in that office. All sorts of, aids, security vote, everything. So when we survive, I said, no. We have to move this to education. It's happening today. If you look at the situation where people are saying today they cannot access their UBEC money, it happened when we were there. So we collapsed the office of the governor. And we're able to use the resources there to put in health, to put in here and everything. So once you have a proper planning, proper budgeting, you could see the gaps you're going to shut down and do this.
Right, interesting perspective. We're just about to count down to the closing goal. Of course, we'll continue this very interesting conversation with the former governor of Anambra State, Peter Obi. Obviously, this is a place that we haven't been in a very long time. A recession, it's tough. But recently you were speaking about the cost of governance, the opportunities to take out waste. I want you to continue to just expound your thoughts on that.
See, well, for me, if you have a situation like we had now, the first thing is to look back and say, how did we arrive at this? It's a critical thing. Unexamined life is not worth living. You must be able to look back and say, what did I do wrong yesterday that made me to be where I am now? And if you accept that you've made fundamental mistakes yesterday, and you're determined and correct same today, you have a better tomorrow. What we're not looking at, how did we arrive here? Let me take issue of one thing, savings. Nigeria discovered oil in 1960. Since 1960. Every other nation that was as lucky as we are, the first thing they tried to do is to bring in a form of saving of a percentage of the income from that. Nigeria chose the other side to consume everything. One is that no country in the world with a diminishing assets, because every natural resource is a diminishing asset. It will finish one day, have refused or is operating without the savings, except us. We decided that whatever we get will be shared immediately and everybody takes his own and run because there's no that.
But that decision is dictated by the current laws, I believe.
That is what I'm saying.
Does that now
that's what I'm
call
saying,
for a review of those
That's
laws?
what I'm saying. So from 1960 to now, we have earned 1.3 trillion in oil. If only our fathers didn't make a decision to save just 10%, would have had about 130 billion, which by the time you put all that interest and profits, it would be about 250 billion today.
And we'll be in a good place.
No, we won't be talking now. It would have been a totally different thing. Our children, the younger ones, will have hope of what I'm saying about their country. But today, we don't have anything. We don't have anything. But what is more worrisome, every successive government blames the other for not saving. Shagari blamed Gowon for not saving. Obasanjo's military government blamed Shagari for not saving. When Buhari then came, before, they blamed, they've been a blame game. You even saw President Obasanjo the other day saying, the governors did not allow me to save. President Buhari now said they didn't allow you to. Okay, we've all agreed that we did not save yesterday. That's why we're here today. What are we doing today to make sure that tomorrow we are not in the same blame game? Are we going to bequeath our children blame and regret? No. We have a constitution that says every revenue received should be credited into federation account and shared
across the
3 tiers of government. That constitution and section should be today, now, when I'm saying now, this period, be taken back to the National Assembly immediately with an amendment that says, forthwith, we will save 10% of every revenue, irrespective of our situation, just for a start. Well, if we do that today, luckily, all those who caused the confusion, all of us are still there. We are still part of the leadership today because we created this confusion. We brought this country to where it is. Whether you go, the governors were the people who refused. the Senate President is the governor before. Those all the actors, whether in federal government, legislature, everything, are all those who created the confusion. So if they truly believe that they are sorry for what all of us did, let us today agree and amend the Constitution to save 10%. Well, if we do that, this country will be able to save about $1 billion every year, just $1 billion. If we had done that, if we do that, by the year 2060, 44 years from today, Wole would have saved $44 billion. If you aggregate it at a 5% every year, we'll be hitting about 150 billion. The story will be different.
Right. So the culture really needs to change.
But today, everybody is still complaining and keeping quiet, and tomorrow we'll still say, hey, if this man had done, let's start now. If that had happened, we won't be here.
All right, I hear you.
That's what caused our problem.
We will continue this conversation. I have to take a short commercial. Of course, we are looking at Nigeria's recession and its economy. And joining us for that conversation is the former governor of Anambra State, Peter Obi. And earlier on, he was sharing his perspective about why it's important for the governments today to focus on savings despite the crisis. And Governor, we can move on to the state governments, because you obviously have a very interesting story to tell about how you were able to wade through your challenges.
It's the same thing in the state. The state have to be able to have a properly developed vision and have a strategy for delivery of that, and includes the needs. We're doing this, but we're also going to save this for tomorrow. And I give you an example. When we started saving dollars, the reason why we did that, to save in foreign currency, is that we said, well, listen, if we're able to do the savings the way we're doing it, by the year 2050, we would have been hitting about $3 billion. But let's even not forget that maybe today nobody can, today nobody can save.
And how much were you able to save over your tenure?
The day I handed over, I had $56 million in Fidelity Bank, $50 million in Diamond Bank, $50 million in Access Bank in Nigeria. The banks that are here, you can go across to them.
So over 150 million.
$156 million. Now, what I'm saying is that if, for example, the state decides not to invest more, by the year 2050, 36 years from now, that investment will be worth about $1.5 billion. They can now approach World Bank, take a 36 non-interest-free loan, which was what we're trying to do them, to get World Bank to say, give me 150 million for erosion, and give me 100 million for education. Non-interest-free. So I'm going to pay back World Bank 40 years from now, and I have what it takes that in 40 years will give me about 1.5 billion. I'll give them their 250 and take my $1.250 billion. Right. And walk away.
But how do you make this case for many states today, which we know are really struggling?
Shut down the cost of governance. It is unacceptable.
That's where it starts.
Let me give you an example, just one example. Education. The most important investment anybody can do today, any nation can do, is in education. Nigeria has the highest number of out-of-school children today in this country that we have. Now, to help with this, federal government decided that they will provide some part of the education by giving them some money, but their request is that you must bring 50% contribution. So let me use this year for example. Federal government is giving each state about 600 million naira. So the state will bring 600 million naira. Now, the entire budget of all the states' expenditure this year is 5.4 trillion. The recommendation for us to meet the goal by 2050, we need to be investing about 10 to 15% in education. For it should be more, 20 to 25%. If you do it, 25% is 1.3 trillion. 20% is about 1 trillion. If you do it by 15%, it's about 800 billion. And if it's 10%, you could see where there are 5.something billion. Now, the all unassessed money in UBEC is 63 billion. And the state said they don't have the money. When their budget is supposed to be at least 540 billion. But we don't have money to assess this. But what is the crisis in it? I know a state where all they need to assess their UBEC money is 1 billion. And if they bring 1 billion, federal government will give them 1 billion. With that, they will be able to construct at 10 million, 200 classrooms. That will be 6 classrooms each, taking 40 people, and they will be able to have classroom for about 48,000. They didn't do it. But the same state spent nearly $1 billion buying jeeps for 25 or 26 house members. It's a crisis.
Right. It's all about priorities and dealing with the crisis, prioritizing
shut down
what you
the
need
cost, because we can no longer afford the picnic and partying. It's finished.
Right. I need to wrap this up, but thank you. Thank you very much for coming in. Very useful and enlightening perspective on governance in Nigeria. Former Governor of Anambra State, Peter Obi, joining us today.